some more sex and violence, with a helping of roller derby, outer space, and criminal trials, that means you miss SKINEMAX. Pick up my new book, SKINEMAX, a love letter to all things softcore in the 90s, over on Amazon, which is on ebook, paperback, and hardcover. I hope you enjoy.
Hello again. Welcome to another Fresh Thoughts review. This video is actually going to be different than my usual fresh viewing reviews. It's not for a movie that I just saw in the cinema or on Netflix or whatever. In fact, this movie's not even that fresh. It came out about 4 months ago. Today I'm going to give you my thoughts on Chris Stuckmann's Shelby Oaks. I'm sure most people here on YouTube are familiar with Chris Stuckmann. He's one of the longest ongoing YouTube film critics and remains both very popular and a bit of a mixed bag for some people in recent days. I've seen a lot of his stuff, and while I don't watch him as regularly as, say, the Nostalgia Critic, I do think he's a decent enough critic. The best way I can describe his reviews is he's the guy you go to see if a movie is worth seeing in the theater because he's short, sweet, to the point, and usually avoids spoilers. My cousin Matt Charleston, who's appeared in a few videos on my channels over the years, is a huge fan of his, and we both agree he's a nice guy to listen to. I know he's become a little divisive in the years for the fact that he generally tries to avoid being overly negative in his videos, and while I can get why that might rub some people the wrong way, I don't think it's a end of the world thing for me anyway as far as watching him. And the worst thing I think you can say about him is he's just too nice. Like, he doesn't get that riled up in recent years. And moving past my thoughts on him as a YouTube critic, this is the first official movie. He's made short films over the years, but this is the first full feature-length film Chris Stuckmann has made, and the hype for this movie has been a lot. Like, I remember before the trailers dropped, the project was announced, filming began after a amazingly successful Kickstarter, I believe, campaign that raised well over $1 million and caught the eye of Mike Flanagan, who was able to get the film some major distribution. When the trailer dropped last year, I did a reaction video to it, and I really did want to see this film when it came out in the cinema, but I had a feeling this would happen. There's only really one big cinema in my town, has about 6 theaters, and while they do occasionally bring in indie films, I had a feeling this might be a little too small to be on their radar, and fortunately, yeah, it just never came to my town, and I was thinking of maybe going out of town to catch a screening of it, but around the time it came out, which I think was around later October, I had a pretty huge project to undertake. For those who don't know, I had the awesome pleasure of being the proofreader for Brad Jones, aka the Cinema Snob's latest novel, SKINEMAX, a wacky-ass tribute and satire to the softcore Cinemax movies of the 90s, just a real roller coaster of all different genres, and it was a pretty big book. That was my main focus starting in late October, going through most of November, so locating a theater that was playing Shelby Oaks was unfortunately not something I could make a priority. I'm not complaining too much. I wouldn't trade the proofreading gig for the world, and before I go on too much longer plugging this thing that isn't Shelby Oaks, I decided that if I couldn't get to the theater, I'd check it out on DVD, which I recently got, and now I've seen it, I can finally do my fresh thoughts. I don't have it in me at the moment to do a scripted review, so this is just going to be my fresh, off-the-cuff thoughts. And I remember when this came out, I tried to avoid reviews, but I did get word of mouth that the reception for it was kind of mixed, but I get into a lot of movies that have mixed reviews, and I know Chris Stuckmann, he spent years working on this, so I was really curious, especially given that he's originally a YouTuber and he used to be on Channel Awesome. I was really curious to see how he came out with this, and now that I've seen it, yeah, this is definitely a film that has a lot of ups and downs. I do think it's worth watching, and I'm not sure the things that bugged me might necessarily bug other people, but overall, it was a very well-made horror film. The main premise is a woman named Mia Brennan Walker, played by Camille Sullivan, is obsessed with finding her sister, Riley, who went missing 12 years earlier, and the sister is was a YouTuber who was into investigating paranormal shit. The first 15 or so minutes of this movie, the pre-credit sequence, which is pretty long, is sort of set up like a documentary, and it was said that this movie would go into the found footage subgenre of horror, and well, it does do that at times. The whole movie is not a found footage style movie. I'd say about 30-40% of it falls under the found footage docu-style, but a good chunk of it is a legit story, legit movie. A lot of crazy shit happens that leads Mia to coming closer to finding her missing sister, and it's a investigation story. And I would say it was very well done in terms of building tension. There was a genuine sense of unease while watching it. The suspense was ongoing. It did put me on edge. I'm not sure it created a sense of fear in me for the whole thing. There were some well-done moments. There are parts where you expect something to happen, like a jump scare, and kind of goes against that. There are times where you do get a jump scare, but it works over well most of the time. And before I forget, the opening where they set it up like a true crime documentary, and where they show the older YouTube of the late 2000s, it was handled pretty excellently. It really captured, I feel, the early days of YouTube, which a lot of people at this point may not remember, with the look and style and the way they portrayed these paranormal investigators. It totally looked like one of those bullshit shows from the 2000s, or something that maybe Dan Aykroyd would fund. And then all of a sudden we get a pretty big shocker, which was shown in the trailer, so this isn't much of a spoiler. All of a sudden we get a very surprising suicide from some random guy who has in his possession a tape that was part of the filming that these paranormal investigators were doing for their show. And this sets in motion her eventually getting a big lead in what happened to her sister. It's a pretty big surprise, and I'll give this film credit for having the guts to go into some pretty fucked up places. We have suicide, we have themes later on involving rape and forced pregnancies, which... yeah, just, Chris Stuckmann's often a soft-spoken dude, so it's interesting to see him just go all out with the unpleasantness, and the music is very good by James Burkholder and this group called the Newton Brothers. This is a good horror score, very effective. I was very into finding out what was the reason, and there's a lot of indie horror films that go the route of just not explaining what's going on, or they just have everything be really fucking weird. And I'm of the opinion, just because you make a movie weird and you don't give answers, that doesn't mean it's scary or that it works. But here, while there is some freaky shit going on, they do give explanations. In the end, I'd say, yeah, very well made, very toe-tapping, but there are a few cons I have. The first one is kind of minor. There's a sequence where Mia goes to investigate a prison, and this scene is very long, in the dark, and it's a while before anything notable happens, and yeah, it was kind of boring, and I found myself having a little hard time focusing. It went on just a little too long, but I quickly got back on track after that. The pace, the transitions were, for the most part, handled well, and the big thing that I take fault with in this movie is the main character of Mia, and I'm not saying Camille Sullivan gives a bad performance. She clearly was acting her ass off, but this character is such a fucking idiot. Like, she's borderline retarded in her actions. She does so many stupid decisions. She very quickly gets the idea that something genuinely paranormal is going on and voices it to her husband, who has the best reaction someone like that could have to hearing someone say all this crazy shit, which is, "You need help." And then she goes off in the middle of the night to an abandoned building. There's just no way of telling what's in there. And then she goes out into the middle of the woods in the middle of the night. And I get it, curiosity killed the cat. Classic H.P. Lovecraft. But her actions are so mind-numbingly dumb that I found myself after a while just not caring what happens to her. And then some shit happens near the end where I feel like she really should see these red flags, and she does the typical thing. This is a cliche where she has a weapon, but she drops it, and she's so easily distracted, that she doesn't think to pick it back up. I'm just like, God! Also, this character is prone to way too much gasping and crying. This film at times gave me vibes of an Ari Aster film like Hereditary or Midsommar, like Florence Pugh in Midsommar, who's crying and breaking down constantly. Could be a bit grating, and that's how I can describe this character. She's dumb, and she's annoying, and that's the big problem. The main character of this movie is just insufferable after a while, but the rest of the film is very well made, and I feel like it is worth watching. I would not give this like a glowing 5-star review, but kind of a bumpy, but still worth recommending 3. And the ending is another thing that really makes me not fully like this, and all I'll say is, if you're looking for closure, you're not going to get it. Also, small con, there's some demon dogs in this. Yeah, they do bring in the paranormal shit, and there's some evil devil hounds, I believe, and maybe they use some real dogs for some shots, but there are some parts where they look very CGI, and that's the kind of thing where that kind of thing, depending on how you handle effects, can be a bit distracting. But nonetheless, I do think it's worth checking out, maybe just for curiosity, and I'm not sure everything that I've listed could bug certain people. I definitely hope to see Chris Stuckmann make more movies, because this shows he has great direction. Maybe a little more practice on fleshing out the story aspects, but as a director, I think he did a pretty decent job. So if you don't want to hear my thoughts on the ending, want to keep this spoiler free, stop right here, but hope you enjoyed what I had to say up to this point. On to the ending. It's revealed that while investigating for a show, Riley and her co-host came across some crazy people who killed the other hosts, and kidnapped Riley and forced her into some demonic wedding, and she's being kept as a prisoner for the past 12 years. And as I said, there are themes of rape and forced pregnancy. She's apparently been forced to give birth multiple times, and many of the babies have been miscarriages and then buried. And now there is a baby that has survived, and the people who kidnapped her, one of them is like a convicted criminal, and he apparently did all this under the influence of his mother, played by Robin Bartlett, who is a pretty good freaky old witch lady. And all this that they've been doing, kidnapping Riley, forcing her to give birth, has been to bring in a child to be a loyal, I guess, and I'm only guessing at this point, loyal servant or monster or reincarnate. It's not clear, but it's connected to this demon that the old woman worships, and we get rituals and chase sequences. At first, the film gives kind of an abrupt jump cut where Riley has been rescued and Mia takes her in along with the baby, and Riley, like, it's clearly Rosemary's Baby here, and she says the kid has to die, and Mia's like, "You're not a murderer," and I'm like, okay, I would not be behind murdering a kid, but can you clearly not see that there's something really fucked up going on here? I mean, Jesus, bitch! And the ending, it is just abrupt. The two sisters fight as Riley tries to suffocate the baby with a pillow, and then she goes out the window and gets mauled to death by the devil hounds. The demon, which Mia has been vividly remembering seeing when she was a child, suddenly appears behind her, and then it looks like Mia is now possessed, and it just ends. I'm just sitting here thinking, that's it? What happened next? And I'm all for ambiguity if the thought of not knowing makes the idea of what could have happened scarier, but in this case, I think a ending with closure would have been more preferred. I have no idea if Chris Stuckmann would ever consider doing a sequel to this. If he did, maybe it would not be as negative of an ending, but I don't know. It just came so fucking abruptly that I left there thinking, that could have been better. But all in all, I don't regret seeing it, and I think it shows a lot of potential, and hopefully Chris gets, because just getting a dream achieved from YouTube critic to actual filmmaker is a very impressive and inspiring journey in itself. Hopefully he gets another one in the can. And the last thing I'll say is the supporting actors in this, Sarah Dern as Riley, she does a great job. Like, she's put through the fucking ringer in this. Robin Bartlett, great small role, and the biggest names in this are people who you could tell they had limited time with them, but Chris Stuckmann did use them well. They were Michael Beach as the detective investigating Riley's disappearance. He was a nice, pleasant, brief character, and the biggest name they got, and he only has one scene, but he's used very well, is Keith David. He plays the former warden of the abandoned prison that Mia goes to check out. It's not a complex role, but it's hard not to get into Keith David, and I'll say this, he was used 100 times better here for this one scene role than he was in Jordan Peele's Nope. Very last fact I can think to mention, just because it's kind of funny. As I mentioned, Chris Stuckmann, he used to be a member of Channel Awesome, and I don't think he has any real ties to them anymore, but I couldn't help but notice Mia, her character, she has a husband played by Brandon Sexton III, and her husband's name is Robert Walker, which means one of the main characters in this is technically Rob Walker. I can't help but wonder, was that a tribute? Possible jab? I don't know, but I'm like, that's fucking funny. And overall, I still wish I had a chance to see this on the big screen. It would have been fun, but the film did make back its budget a few times, so it's not like it didn't have some success. I do know it's still getting kind of mixed reviews, but definitely interesting, and hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you again, hopefully soon.